let me introduce, this is Chris Rohn here. I'm on Central Time in Memphis, Tennessee. Let me introduce Mr. Ashwin Kamlani, who is joining us from Rome, Italy, where it's 11:15 in the evening his time.
That's right.
So it's very nice and very professional and very considerate, Ashwin, that you join us tonight, this afternoon.
Pleasure to do it.
And this is kind of a little different step for us today because Ashwin is a real tech guy. And usually we talk about operations and we talk about food costs and we talk about average daily rate and that kind of stuff. And Ashwin is a tech guy who's a real guru on consumer loyalty and some of these frequent flyer programs and frequent guest programs and all that loyalty stuff. So we're going to get a good education today. So Ashwin, my friend, my new friend, take it away.
Absolutely. All right. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Or do you not want me to use slides? You want me to just talk?
But your choice. I think
it says host has disabled attendee screen sharing.
Now, my grad assistant Ashi,
I can do it for you.
Okay, great.
He's the real key to this whole deal here.
All right.
As a co-host, something like that. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Where? Yeah.
So while
can you please try? I make it as a co-host.
yeah, sure. Let's try it and see what happens. Yes, that appears to be working. Let me know when you can see that.
Yeah, we can see everything. What you are showing now.
Let's see. Okay, so does that work? You can see the slides?
I can see it.
Yeah. Great. Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's really a pleasure and it's nice to meet all of you. I know we have about an hour, so I'm going to try to get through this and leave some time for questions at the end. If anyone wants to reach out to me, just connect with me on LinkedIn and feel free to send me questions or comments afterward if we don't have time. So I thought I would give you a bit of a picture of what it's like to become an entrepreneur in the hospitality industry, and I'll give you a bit of a history of how I got there. And this is a no holds barred history of basically what has happened over the last, I guess 20 years or so. So why don't I just dive right in? So just quick background, Indian by background, born in the US. My two older brothers are quite serious. One's a lawyer, one's a banker. I'm the youngest of three, and so I went to university and studied Spanish and psychology, and needless to say, my parents were very worried about my future. Very, very concerned, but I just followed my heart and decided I was going to study what really interested me. And actually, it was serendipitous when I was graduating from undergrad. One of my friends happened to have an interview with this company called Anderson Consulting, which I had never heard of before. And he said, yeah, they're interviewing hundreds of people. You should just come. I'm sure they'll talk to you. And needless to say, the interview went very well. And I went through 3 rounds of interviews. And out of 200 or 300 people, they selected 8. And one of them happened to be me. And even though I had 0 real professional experience in technology, I think they were looking for people who could interact well with clients and teach them how to use the technology. And this was 1998, so there was a huge e-commerce and technology boom happening in the United States, well, all over the world, really. So I got the job and worked for both Accenture and PricewaterhouseCoopers. Now, I had always had an interest in travel, and when I was interviewing, they said, oh, if you like to travel, then you're going to love this job. but they didn't tell me that I would be traveling to Princeton, New Jersey, and Rochester, New York. And nothing bad to say about Princeton, New Jersey, and Rochester, New York. It's just not quite what I had in mind when I heard about traveling. So I decided I should really go after the hospitality industry. It's in my family, and I felt like that would be an industry I would be very passionate about. So I went to Cornell University and applied to the master's program for hospitality. And I remember in the interview, they were scratching their head and saying, "You haven't worked a day in your life in the hotel industry." And of course, I said, well, I hadn't worked a day in my life in technology either. But look, I've spent the last 3 years working in Accenture and PwC, and it's all gone really well. So I think that there's an opportunity in the hospitality industry for technology to play a larger role, and they agreed. So the interesting thing is I joined Cornell University in September 2001, which was the last crisis of this magnitude. I can't even really compare it, but it was a moment when the whole world was looking at the travel industry and saying, oh, this is it, it's all over, people will never travel again, and hotels are going to disappear and nobody will fly. Now it's obviously very different. That was, 9/11 was, although tragic, it was a one isolated incident that scared the life out of everybody. But, it took probably, from what I hear, 2 years for the hotel and airline industry to really, recover from that. This pandemic is, well, we can talk about this for hours, but a much more drawn out event that I think will have a longer lasting impact. But anyway, because of 9/11, the job market was awful. And the university was telling us, look, nobody's going to hire anybody. So instead of finding internships, which is what Cornell students normally would do, they organized classes for everybody during the vacation periods. But I refused to accept that. So I started researching companies, and I spoke Spanish because of my degree. So I said, well, what's the biggest Spanish hotel group out there? And I discovered this company called Melia. Now, at Cornell University, they talked a lot about Four Seasons and IHG and Starwood, and back then Starwood, which is now part of Marriott, but nobody had really heard of Melia. And when I started asking people, hey, does anyone know anybody at Melia? How can I get in touch with this company? Nobody really knew how to help me. So long story short, I found a Cornell alum named Peter Yesowich, who's still very active in the industry. And he happened to be doing some work for Melia back then. And so he was nice enough to introduce me to a gentleman named Emmanuel Schrabmeyer, who was the VP of marketing at the time. And I finally got in touch with Emmanuel and said, listen, I want to work for your company. I understand the situation right now. You don't have to pay me a penny. I will pay for my own flight. Just give me something to do during my winter break. So he said, okay, great. We're opening this beautiful resort down in Mexico, but it's empty because, the pre-opening budget has been canceled and nobody's traveling. So why don't you just go down there and work with the general manager and see how it goes? So while my friends were freezing their butts off in Ithaca, New York in December and January, I was here, which was a resort called the Paradisus Riviera Cancun. It is no longer called that, but it still exists. I went down there. The resort was empty. The general manager was a German man named Ken Dietrich, who said, look, we're going to give you a suite overlooking the ocean. It's all inclusive. Hey, eat whatever you want. So I had this resort kind of to myself for a month. And I used the time to start talking to the general manager about e-commerce. And this was right in 2001 when companies like Expedia and Travelocity and Orbitz, and there used to be 20 or 30 of them, were just really getting started. Expedia, you might not know, was born out of Microsoft. Travelocity which is now owned by Expedia, was born out of a company called Sabre, which you might have heard of, started by American Airlines, I believe, back in the 50s. So a lot of hotels didn't really know about e-commerce and how to use the internet to get people to come book reservations. Back then, they were still faxing papers back and forth, and in Mexico, you had literally armies of people in large rooms with stacks of paper on their desk, manually inputting these reservations into their system, and it was craziness. And so I asked this general manager, hey, have you ever heard of Expedia? And he said, no, never heard of it. I don't know what you're talking about. Back then we were doing crazy things like auctioning off suites on eBay, and we got all kinds of, visibility from that. So, and Ron, you can correct me if I misstate anything here, but I believe Ken Dietrich called up Ron Roy, who's with us today, and said, hey,
That's correct.
there's this guy down here, and I know, Ron, you've always talked about this e-commerce stuff, and this guy seems to know what he's talking about. Maybe you should come meet him. And so Ron was, I don't know if he was already coming down there, or if he just came to see me, but he came down there and met with me, and I showed him everything I was doing. And he said, listen, I believe that there's a future in this. Why don't you come work with me right now? And I said, Ron, this is a dream come true, but I've only completed 6 months of my 2-year master's degree, and it's Cornell. I've got to finish it. And he said, well, I can't promise you I'll wait, but why don't we do this? When you have vacation periods, let me know and we'll set something up. And so Ron organized for me to work with Melia during my internships. And he organized that during the summer, I would go to Mallorca. And if anyone on this call has heard of Mallorca, who has been to Mallorca, it is essentially paradise on earth, and especially June, July, and August. I went there to work with a gentleman named Luis del Olmo, and if that last name sounds familiar to you, which it should, I believe you recently had his son Daniel speaking with you a couple weeks ago. But Luis del Olmo at the time was the chief marketing officer of Melia. And so I helped him to analyze essentially the e-commerce strategy for Melia. Now, let me give you a little bit of information and background on what happened with the industry and these online travel agencies over the last 15 to 20 years. So when I started working full-time for Melia after I finished my degree at Cornell, everybody was excited, right? Travelocity and Expedia, all these companies were bringing a new way to do business. Now, I heard Chris mention that you've talked about ADR. So imagine you've built a hotel and it's down in Mexico, and you have to sign literally a paper contract, let's say in 2020, for all the business they're going to send you in 2021. And so today you have to write on that paper what rates they're going to pay you every time they send you a booking next year. Well, if suddenly your hotel in Cancun becomes super popular and you're full all the time, well, that's tough luck for you, because you have this paper contract with these rates, and it's not as easy to, dynamically adjust your rate according to the demand that you're seeing in the marketplace. So one of the things that Expedia and Travelocity and these other companies did, which was great for hotels, was to give them an electronic way to control the rates and availability that they had in the market. Now, when Travelocity first started, and they were the first ones, they were acting as a travel agent. So just to give you a little background and make sure I'm not, let's say, assuming that you know all this stuff already, when a travel agent back then used to make a reservation for a hotel, they would be entitled to typically a 10% commission. So on a $1,000 reservation, you were looking at $100 for the travel agent. Now, when Travelocity first started, they plugged right into Sabre, which is a travel agent database for airlines and hotels. And so they were earning a standard travel agent 10% commission, which didn't scare anybody. And then Expedia did the same thing with a different system, but also earning a travel agent commission. What Expedia did, which completely changed the game, was they acquired a company called Travelscape. Now, travel agents had two options. Well, they probably had more than two options, but just for the purposes of this conversation, they could either go straight to the hotel and make a reservation, or they could go to a tour operator or a wholesaler. Now, a wholesaler would go to the hotel and say, listen, I have this army of travel agencies making reservations through me, so I can't earn only 10%. I need 30. And some of these tour operators or wholesalers actually owned their own planes. And so they would go to the hotel and say, look, I own the plane, so I've taken on all this risk. I'm bringing, hundreds of passengers to this destination. So 30 is not good enough for me. I need 50% off of the price or 60% off of the price. And hotels would do this, right? So when Expedia acquired this wholesaler called Travelscape, they now had an online audience purchasing hotel rooms from them, but instead of earning the 10% commission that Travelocity was earning, they suddenly started earning 30% commission. Now, the other thing that they did, which was brilliant, was the travel agent systems were not meant to be seen by consumers. So when Travelocity first started selling rooms online, you would see these really ugly descriptions of rooms like OCNVW, which was short form for Ocean View, but the customer had no idea. So Expedia hired their own content writers to go out, visit hotels, write up descriptions, and take photographs. And suddenly, you had the first real beautiful travel website that was a pleasure to read. And, that's how they completely overtook all of the others, and they were earning 30%, right? So it was a ton of money that they were earning. And they didn't have to pay the travel agents because they were selling directly to the customer. So this was all good for several years, and hotels were all excited about the increase in reservations that they were getting from these new electronic channels of distribution. Where things started to go off the rails and get a little bit, unfriendly was hotels started to realize, you know what, I could build my own website and I could have my own reservation system and I could attract customers that way. And that would be a lot cheaper for me. So I'm going to do that. Now, once you build a website, then you have to rely on digital marketing for people to find that website. So when someone goes into Google, or back then Netscape or Yahoo, or whatever people used back then, you wanted to make it so that when someone searched for Paradisus Riviera Cancun, your website showed up right at the top. Now they also had, as they still do today, ways in Google that you could pay for advertising. So you would pay every time someone clicks on your advertisement. So hotels slowly started to learn this game, but it was already too late because all these companies like Expedia and Travelocity had so much money that they could just completely monopolize these advertising platforms. TripAdvisor also came out and became very powerful with the consumer because, and even today, I would say they're the number one place for people to find reviews on hotels. And so they had a lot of visibility with the consumer. And it took them a long time to launch an advertising model, but they also had a pay-per-click model. But hotels had no chance. I mean, if you have one hotel, you have a marketing budget of, a few $1,000s, maybe if it's a bigger hotel, tens of thousands of dollars. If you're Melia, then you have millions of dollars, but it's nothing compared to the hundreds of millions or even billions that these huge, online travel agencies were spending. And so hotels started to feel quite like they had no chance. What made it worse was that as these companies grew powerful, they started to dictate a little bit, more than a little bit, how the hotel should be running their business. So let's say you have 100 rooms in your hotel. Now you decide, well, I'm only going to give 10 of those rooms to Expedia, because if I give them my whole hotel, then essentially I'm losing 30% of my revenue, every time they send me a reservation. So I'm only going to give them 10 rooms. Now Expedia sells those 10 rooms, and they come to you and they say, hey, we sold your 10 rooms, now we need more. And let's say I, as the hotel owner, I say, well, I don't really want to give you more. I'm just going to sell the rest myself. They say, okay, see how that goes for you. Well, what they did was, when a customer would go to Expedia and search for a hotel in your destination, they would say that you were sold out. And they had so many eyeballs looking at their website that the customer wouldn't bother going to your website to see if you were actually sold out. They would just book another hotel on Expedia. Now, let's just say that that customer really knew your hotel and they wanted to stay with you, so they actually went to Google and searched for you. Then the problem began that they couldn't find your website because all of these other websites were, controlling that real estate on the Google page, right? So hotels started to feel a little bit bullied. And even if the hotel were to say, look, Expedia, thank you very much, but I don't want to work with you anymore. Expedia would conveniently take years to remove the hotel listing from the website. So again, customers would go there, assuming they're this, be all and end all of travel, and see that the hotel was sold out, and that would prevent the customer from actually going and finding the hotel. So it's a very frustrating situation. So, at Melia, the first half of my career was growing the business with all these online travel agencies. And then the second half of my career there was figuring out how to get more of our business to book directly through, improving the website experience, through better digital marketing tactics. But I also got involved at an industry level. And Ron actually encouraged me to go to these industry events and speak at conferences, and that was tremendously helpful to get to know all the other companies and build a network, throughout the hospitality industry. And being that it was an international company and that I spoke a different language, I was able to build a network in Mexico and in Spain and elsewhere as well. Now, you'll see why this is important a little bit later, but one of my first, let's say in the first few months I was working at Melia in Miami, a gentleman by the name of Gerardo Garcia walked through my office door and sat down, and he had just joined a company called TravelClick, which today is a multi-billion-dollar company. But back then it wasn't, and they were out there selling these reports about basically, which travel agents were booking your hotel. Now, I became one of his first big clients, and he and I became good friends. And I'll tell you why that becomes important later. Now, while I was at Melia, I remember very specifically there was one time when the boss of our office in Miami, his name was Andre, invited me to come down and speak with the owner's son, Gabriel Escarer, and the president, Gabriel Escarer, the father of the family that started this amazing company. And I sat around this room of, businessmen in suits, going through these long PowerPoint presentations, painting a very rosy picture of everything that was going on in the company. And they were showing all these trade shows they were attending and all these, events they were having and how great everything was. And I got up there and very, I hope diplomatically, told him that, what, we could be doing a lot better, and that e-commerce was this new amazing opportunity, but that there were certain challenges internally that we needed to overcome in order to really do it well. And he took me aside. I remember looking around the room and all these guys were like, had their mouth open saying, what is this guy doing? You're not supposed to be so honest. But the CEO took me aside after this meeting and said, listen, I really appreciated your honesty, and here's my email address, and don't tell anyone, just stay in touch with me. And anytime you think we need to do something, or you need something from me, or you feel we should be doing something a certain way, just send me a note. And sure enough, every time I went to head office, he called me up to his office, and we just built a great rapport. And he eventually had me transferred to the Mallorca head office. And I was able to run e-commerce and distribution globally for this amazing company. So, you know, I learned so much from Melia, not only about the industry, but you know, about technology, e-commerce, so many things. And so I decided that maybe it was time for me to start my own company. So I started a company called Regatta Travel Solutions, and I realized that there were a lot of smaller hotel companies out there, or even independent hotels, that also wanted more direct business through their own website. But when I looked at the other companies that were out there selling technology and services, and hey, we can get you to the _1 page of Google, you know, the hotels were all kind of overwhelmed. I mean, you had hotels that had 50 rooms, and the owners were changing the sheets and running the front desk, and they didn't have time to learn how to build a website and get it positioned well and figure out how to get more direct business. And so I started a company to help do that. Now, it just so happened that I knew these developers down in Argentina, and they had always been saying to me, hey, Ashwin, you know what, why don't you and us start this business together? And so I said, okay, guys, I'm ready. So I gave them a small percentage of the company and told them, look, I don't have a lot of money to pay you, so whatever revenue we have in year one, I'll just give it all to you. And they said, okay, hey, look, we trust you, let's just do that. So we built our first reservation system. So whenever you go to a hotel website, quite often it's one company that built the website, it's another company that's providing that reservation system on the website. And so we decided that was going to be our business. We built one of these reservation systems that you could put into a hotel website. The problem was I didn't have any customers. So I was able to get this system built essentially for free within 2 months or so. And then I got in my car back then in Miami and went around just knocking on the door of every hotel, up and down Miami Beach and South Beach and Fort Lauderdale. And everybody just said, no, 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 we've never heard of you before. You know, you have no references. There's no way we're putting your system on our website. Well, I finally found this one guy, and this was 2010, and his little hotel, which you see here, it looks quite nice. He did a great job of renovating it. The problem was it was around 54th and Biscayne Boulevard, which back then was quite a seedy part of town. So he was surrounded by all these dumpy motels, and he himself was also renting rooms by the hour, taking people off the street. And he was a really nice guy, didn't speak a word of English. He was Venezuelan, and I sat down with him and I said, look, I think you got a really nice hotel here, and if you work with me, I think we could double your room rate, and instead of you taking people off the street, I think we could have this place filled weeks in advance. And he said, okay, let's do it. So I said, the first thing you got to do is stop taking these people off the street, because if we get you listed in Expedia and Orbitz and Travelocity, and we build you a website, and those customers are mixing with these customers, all it takes is a couple of bad reviews in TripAdvisor and you're done. So he said, okay, let's do it. So he stopped taking those people off the street, and sure enough, you know, it only took, I think, a month or two before we started to see this pickup of reservations through his website and a couple of good reviews on TripAdvisor. And we just totally changed this guy's business. And he was calling me every few hours like, oh, we got this many reservations. And it was just really exciting. And, you know, suddenly we had this revenue coming in, and it was just a great way to launch the business. So we started out with this very basic reservation system where you could put in your dates, see the rooms, click the room you wanted, book it, and be done. But I started to hear things as we grew the business, and I started to get more customers, especially down in the Caribbean. I started to hear things about operational challenges they were having. So I'll give you an example. Actually, I'll do that a little bit later, but as we grew the business, I started to ask some of my industry contacts if they would be interested in working with us. Now we had, at the end of our first year of business, maybe 10 small independent hotels that were working with us. And I think in the first year we made maybe $100,000 in revenue, and we were all excited about that. Now it just so happens that my good friend Gerardo Garcia, who I told you about earlier, who used to work for TravelClick, who also had their own reservation system, and we were, this little tiny startup company going against this giant company. Well, Gerardo became the head of sales and marketing for Palace Resorts. And they had these beautiful, all-inclusive properties, which you see on your screen. The Moon Palace, I think, has something like 4,000 rooms. It's like a Vegas property. It's unbelievable. And they also, at the time, had several Hard Rock hotels. Actually, there was one big one down in the Dominican Republic. And Gerardo agreed to give me a chance, and he became my biggest customer. So he introduced me to the owner, and this is what really helped us. The business just took off. So we were earning a small commission on every single booking that was coming through this website, and we were saving them money, and we were making a lot of money, and it was just an amazing experience. And so going back to my point earlier about listening to customers and what their challenges were, I'll give you a few examples of this. So Palace Resorts was telling us, look, we have all of these people coming to our website and looking for reservations, but the vast majority of these people do not make a reservation. I think 99% of those people were shopping around and then leaving. So that's a huge lost opportunity, right? Only 1% of the visitors were actually booking something. So they said, how can we go back out and contact these people and say, hey, I know you were interested in my hotel. What if I make you a special offer? And I said, look, Gerardo, I mean, that's a great idea, but unless someone actually makes a reservation, we don't have their name and their email address, and there's really no way to communicate with them. So I went back to my development team, and we threw around this idea, and I said, you know what? American Airlines allows you to make a reservation, but put it on hold first for 24 hours. Why couldn't we do that? So let's just ask for the customer's name and email address and let them hold the room. And then we've got a way to contact them. We know already what they were looking for, what dates they wanted. We don't have to ask them any of that stuff because they were on the checkout screen. So then we can tell the hotel, hey, Mr. Joe Smith was looking at this room on these dates, and he put the room on hold, but he didn't actually book the reservation. Then Palace can quietly email this customer and say, look, what if we were to give you 10% off that price? Then you can come back and book it within the next 24 hours. The nice thing about that was, if Palace Resorts decided to suddenly do a 10% off promotion, let's say in the month of December, they would also have to give that 10% off to Expedia and Travelocity and everybody else, and then pay an enormous commission on top of that. Because the rules were that you could not run a promotion on your website and not also give it to these other companies. But this way, it was just directly emailed to the customer, and rather than putting the whole month on sale, they could do it for specific dates that this customer was looking for. So not to get too technical, but it was just a very convenient and comfortable and innovative way for hotels to send out unique offers for specific time periods without being detected by the larger market. So I'll give you one more example of what we did here. This is a very high-end hotel down in Antigua called Hermitage Bay. It's probably, well, I don't know about today, but in the good old days, it was about $2,000 a night to stay in this place, maybe 1,500, but definitely way out of my budget. And I met with this owner during the conference, and I noticed that on his website, he didn't have a reservation system. So I said, look, I understand you're this high-end hotel and you probably want this high-touch experience. You want to speak with your customers, but don't you think some of them might want to book online? And he said, no, I'll never do that. So I said, well, why not? He said, well, because people don't come to Antigua and then decide to stay in my hotel. They're coming to Antigua because they want to stay in my hotel. So we've got 25 individual villas, and quite often somebody will want to come and stay for 2 weeks. I'd like to meet these people and find out how they can afford 2 weeks in this place. But they want to come for 2 weeks, but sometimes we don't have one villa available for 2 weeks. So they would have to stay in villa number 3 for the first week and then switch to villa number 12 for the second week. And on the phone, I can explain that to the customer, but there's no online reservation system that can handle that type of logic. The system will just say, hey, do I have a room available for 14 nights? No? Okay, well, tell the customer there's nothing available. So I said to him, look, I'm going to come back to this conference in 1 year's time and I will come up with a solution and then you're going to sign with me. He said, okay, you show me a solution for this, I'll sign with you. So again, sat with the developers and came back to this conference a year later and showed this owner that the system could now not only search for which room was available, but which combination of rooms might be available. So we would show the customer in a very simple way, yes, you can stay here for 14 nights, but you'd have to switch, you'd have to stay in this villa for 7 nights and then switch to this one for 7 nights. And believe it or not, people were willing to do it. They just really wanted to stay in this hotel. And sure enough, this hotel signed with us and they're still a customer today. So just to give you an idea of, I think one of the things we did well was to listen to our customers about challenges they were dealing with or operational things that today's technology was not able to handle. And then just say, hey, there's got to be a way to fix this. Obviously, there were things that we couldn't do. But by creating these unique ways of selling to the customer, we developed, I would venture to say, the most advanced reservation system out there at the time, 4 or 5 years ago. So I can't take all the credit for everything here. I have to say, we had an amazing team around the table. It was a lot of fun. This was our team. I moved from Miami up to Virginia, and this was our team in Virginia. We used to sit around this big table and just work all together. And if you notice the decor, it looks like a bit of an anthropology store. That's my wife. She's the who I met at Melia, by the way. She was the director of sales and marketing at the resort in Puerto Vallarta. But anyway, I can't state enough the importance of having the right people around the table when not only when you're running your own business, but in any job. It's extremely important. And I would even go as far to say that it really plays a significant role in how successful you will be and how successful any company will be. And going back in time, I had such amazing people around the table with me at Melia, and I learned a lot from those people, and that helped me to start and grow my own business and build a similar type of culture around me at Regatta. So here's where it gets a bit ugly. This gives you a bit of a history of our revenue at the company. And you'll see from 2010 to 2011 and 2012, we were able to really grow the business. Now, Palace Resorts was a family-owned business. And as quite often happens with family-owned businesses that become hundreds of millions or billion-dollar businesses, there was a fight in the family between 2013 and 2014. I'm sure the fight started way before that, but the two brothers decided, we're going to split up this company. You take half the hotels and I'll take half the hotels. And they both remained clients of ours for at least a year after that. But then one of the brothers decided to start rebranding all of his hotels as Hard Rock hotels. And Hard Rock International had a global agreement with a much bigger company than us. And so they said, look, we love working with you, but unfortunately, we've got to go with this other company. And so we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue and had to spend the next year from 2014 to 15 essentially recovering that lost revenue. And so if this chart were to continue, the revenue in 2015 was right about on par with 14. We really had very little growth, which was a success, because had we not, recovered that money, we would have been losing money. So in about the year 2000, well, in the year 2015, we started to get approached by companies who wanted to acquire us. One of the first companies was a company called LeisureLink, and I was so excited about this company. It was based in Salt Lake City. They had built technology, I won't get into the details, but they had built a technology for the vacation rental industry. And I already knew back then that Airbnb and vacation rentals, I mean, it didn't take a genius. I mean, if you just looked around at what was happening, it was clear that this was an up and coming area of the industry that was going to be big. So I loved this company, and it was run by this guy who used to be at, I believe, Goldman Sachs, and they were going to raise all this money, and it was going to be this huge success. Thank goodness, right at the last minute, before I was about to sign with these guys, I had some help looking deeper into the company, and somebody was able to find all these red flags that this company wasn't doing as well as they painted. And so I walked away from it, and 6 months later they went bankrupt. So completely dodged that bullet. It was a scary moment, but this stuff can happen. In 2016, I met another company called Kognitive and went to meet the founder. And the reason I chose this company was, while all of the other companies that had approached us were interested in acquiring our technology because they also were selling technology. So for example, let's say there was a company selling a system, a property management system, which is what the hotel uses when you check in to assign rooms and print your receipt and all kinds of other things. They said, hey, if we have your reservation system, maybe we can sell a lot more of these property management systems. And that just really didn't excite me very much. I mean, after everything I had done at Melia and then with my own company, I really wanted to do something big that would have a big impact, not just go out and sell more technology. Now, Kognitive, when I met the founder, first of all, he had already successfully taken another company public, which is now worth $4 billion. And when he talked to me, it wasn't about selling technology. He talked to me about changing commerce. And look, this was 5 years ago, but he was already telling me that, Facebook is not as great as everyone thinks it is, and there's all this evil stuff going on, and Amazon isn't as great as everyone thinks it is. And at the time I was like, this guy sounds a little crazy to me, but but good crazy, and he wants to change the world, and he's clearly got investors. This is kind of the wagon I'm going to hitch my company to. And sure enough, we just merged 2 or 3 months ago, and from a 50-person company, we are now a 600-person company. And they run loyalty programs for some of the biggest names out there, like PetSmart and Aeromexico. I mean, Hawaiian Airlines. Is like a whole list of banks and retailers, and they work with HBSC and Walmart and all kinds of amazing companies. And so the vision of Kognitive is to allow these companies to more easily do business with each other. Just quickly, so we have a little bit of time for questions here. You could have a company like, for example, Walmart, do a deal with Hilton Hotels and say, oh, well, let's do something where every time someone stays at a Hilton, maybe if they want to, they can earn Walmart points. I'm just making it up. Well, that's doable, but it's all very it's all very offline, you know. It's really ugly how that would work. I mean, you would have people emailing files back and forth about how many points needed to be credited, and it's a horrible customer experience. And so Kognitiv is essentially laying the foundation and the plumbing and the business model for all of these companies all over the world to instantly exchange points with each other and do deals with each other. And we're essentially creating almost like a stock market for loyalty points, and in a way where, yeah, it just becomes much more easy for these all these companies to work together. Now, why is that important for hotels and airlines? Well, you may have gathered from this presentation that if you were to open a hotel tomorrow, you would either be filling your rooms through Expedia and Booking.com, which have essentially bought up everybody else, or you'd be relying on your own website where you'd have to spend money in Google and TripAdvisor competing against Expedia and Booking.com. So our view is, if we create this huge network of companies, we have a new way to reach millions and millions and millions of consumers all over the world. And if you're a hotel, maybe you're sick of spending your money in Google. Maybe you'd be interested in taking 10% of the reservation value and rewarding Walmart's customer with Walmart points automatically. So I don't want to get too crazy with this, but it opens up a huge opportunity for hotels to now reach consumers directly, bypassing online travel agencies and bypassing Google and TripAdvisor, and going directly to a major bank, retailer, or entertainment company, and reaching their audience using their own loyalty program. So I think I'm just gonna a quick note for you about, you know, after being acquired. Honestly, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. I'm very happy with the company and their vision and what they want to achieve. I think it's great, and if they pull it off, I think it can be huge. It was very difficult though to go from running my own, 20-person company where I handpicked each person and made sure that it was very open and transparent, and that we were listening to the junior developer down in Argentina if he had a concern about something we were doing, to now being part of a 600-person company where, frankly, it's run by like a bigger company. I mean, they have to do things differently, and sometimes that can be a little disheartening and a little frustrating. Also, when you're 100% in control of the company, you can sit in front of a customer and with a straight face say, I promise you I will deliver that to you by a certain time, and if I don't, you're going to hear from me. But now I have literally no control over the development team and when they deliver things and the quality level of what they deliver. So that's also very challenging. Yeah, so in a nutshell, it's difficult to go out there and use my network and these relationships I've built up over the last 20 years and tell them about this new great innovative thing, but have very little control over how it's executed, how quickly it's executed, and how well everything is done. So I'll just breeze through this. If any of you are thinking about being an entrepreneur, pay very close to your attention to your corporate structure. I had no idea what I was doing, and in the US, the most common structures are C corporation or LLC. Bottom line is, if you decide to be an LLC and then someone acquires your company and gives you equity in exchange for that acquisition, in other words, they're giving you shares in their company, you are now liable for the tax on the value of that equity. So, not to get too crazy about this, but if someone pays you, $1 million in cash and $5 million worth of equity, you're in big trouble, because you owe the IRS tax on that $5 million, and the 1 million of cash they gave you isn't going to cut it. So bottom line, that's something to pay attention to. don't compromise on principles. Just very brief story. I had a gentleman offer to sign an agreement with me for his hotel as long as I paid him, I think it was 20% of all of the revenue we earned. You know, I did it because it was in South America, and I justified it to myself. Well, that's how business is done down there. But in hindsight, I wouldn't do it again. When you're being acquired, they comb through every little tiny thing. And of course, I was very open with them and said, hey, look, there's this little thing that this happened. And, we had to clean it up and have this gentleman sign a contract that, that was over and done. But, these are the things you deal with as an entrepreneur and as the owner of the business. You want to grow, you want to do well, and you're faced with these difficult ethical challenges sometimes. You learn from those, right? Yeah, I think I'm just gonna end there to make sure we have some time for questions. So I think the rest of this is pretty self-explanatory. Chris, over to you.
Well, Ashwin, terrific, man. Man, this is a real education for me. I had,
Sure it is.
Thanks, Ron. I knew I'd get a lot of support out of you. This is a part of the business.
I hope I didn't dump too much information on everybody, and I tried to explain as best I could. But if anyone has questions about anything I've talked about, I'd be happy to go into more detail.
Well, let's do that. Who's first?
I'll go first, if you don't mind.
Oh, go ahead.
Mary, okay. Go ahead, Mary. You have.
No. You go ahead, Dr. Radish, please.
Okay, Ashwin, welcome. I'm the dean of the school. I'm sorry I came in a bit late. I was in another call. So thank you for doing this. This was very enlightening. I do have a question because you're in the tech area. We hear a lot about blockchain technologies coming into reservations and trying to eliminate the middle people. Can you talk a little bit about where that's heading and how you think that's going to play out?
Absolutely, I can. So does everyone have a basic understanding of what blockchain is and how it works? Kind of?
You're going to educate me again, Ashwin.
All right, okay.
I've heard the term.
Yeah, so the easiest way I can explain it is this. When you walk into a store and use your credit card, that transaction goes through some kind of central hub, right? Which is typically a bank. And that bank is the regulator of all of those transactions. They've got to make sure nothing fraudulent is happening, and they approve it or disapprove it, right? The way blockchain works is it completely eliminates that central system. So that's why they call it a decentralized, web or decentralized technology, because instead of having one central authority controlling everything, you have individual computers all over the world with the ability to verify transactions and process them. So you may have heard of things like, Bitcoin, where it's more secure, and, governments are terrified of this technology because, they have their central currency and they can control that, and they can devalue it tomorrow if they want to. But with Bitcoin, since it's not controlled by any central authority or government, essentially it's controlled by the people, right? So that may give you kind of a sense of what blockchain is. But when it comes to your question about the role that will play in hospitality, look, there are a lot of buzzwords thrown around the industry, all industries, right? Artificial intelligence and, blockchain's another one. I mean, there are companies out there looking at how blockchain can be applied to the industry and all industries. And I have no doubt that at some point we will start to see it play a bigger role. But I think today the cost of running a blockchain and processing these transactions and controlling it all is more difficult than people think. So it still hasn't been figured out. I mean, there are a lot of companies investing in this area, but it remains to be seen exactly how it's going to work.
Thank you. That helps.
Okay, who's next?
Mary, I know you had a question.
Yes, sorry. My name is Maryam Azadegan. I'm a graduate student. Thank you so much for your time. It was very educational. And I'm sorry that I turned off my camera because I had a little things going on that I had to basically block the camera. So I
Not a
apologize for
problem.
that. Going back to your information about Expedia, is that still going on? Because our property, it's one of them that you just use as an example, very small property. And I have been working on eliminating the third party reservation because we have only 28 rooms, and basically within the last few months, we decided to go with TravelClick because they promised us that they will advertise our property. And also when people go to third party to make reservation, TravelClick kind of guide them toward our website by the end of the transaction. So I don't know how much of it is going to happen, but is it still true that Expedia might show us property as sold out and basically turn people down to this day?
Unfortunately, that is still a possibility. So, once you cancel those agreements, it may be that your hotel is still active or visible on that website, and they just say it's not available. Because you have to remember that these companies, the way they make money is by building a wall around every customer that's looking for a hotel. Okay. So they don't play fair. They just want every single customer in the world who's interested in booking a hotel to come to their website no matter what. So they kind of don't care if that customer was specifically looking for your hotel. They go into Google and search for your name, and they click on Expedia only to find out that they are not selling your hotel because Expedia says, hey, a certain percentage of those people will just end up booking someone else. I get my commission, so it's worth it. You have to kind of put yourself in their shoes and kind of think the way they do. Unfortunately, it is still the case, and things have evolved quite a bit. Since I was working at Melia, they have since acquired, Expedia acquired Trivago and Booking.com acquired Kayak, and so almost anywhere a potential guest turns, they end up with Expedia or Booking. So again, that's why we're so excited about what Kognitiv is doing, because we think we can just break that open and give the whole industry a brand new way to reach these customers. But get back to your question.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So back to your question. Look, TravelClick is a great company, and there are a lot of good companies out there, but they're kind of stuck to do what hotels have always done, which is, well, we're going to go bid money in Google, or we're going to, buy advertising in TripAdvisor, or I think you can even buy advertising in Expedia now, where someone can click an ad and come to your website. But at the end of the day, the money is going back into Expedia's pocket, or you're competing in Google on a playing field with mammoth companies that are just impossible to compete with. So yeah, it's quite a difficult situation for independent.
Thank you so much.
Ashwin,
Yes.
this is Dan Beasley again. I'm going to have to check out here, but I want to say a couple things if I might. First off, it was extremely interesting to listen to your presentation. Technically, as Radesh knows, I am not trained, educated, or whatever in the hospitality industry. So I've been learning as I go over the last few years, and I found your presentation extremely interesting. And as an educator for the last 40 or 50 years, I want to say you're a superb educator.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daniel. That means a lot.
Excellent teacher.
I learned from the best.
And I worked at Michigan State for a while, so I may have to talk to you about that Cornell Michigan State come. But,
I was actually talking about Mr. Roy, who's on the line with
Oh,
us.
okay, that's different. The other thing is speaking as a consumer. Just I'm just traveling guy. And we've traveled overseas, and we travel at least 2 or 3 times a year, except this year, of course. You have reinforced something that I've always done. I may not always get the best price, but I rarely go to Expedia or Travelocity. I have absolutely no use for Hotels.com after some problems I had with them. I always make my own reservations directly whenever possible. Now that may not be the smartest thing to do, but it's always worked for me rather well. And you some things you said kind of reinforced that for me. So whether you meant to do that or not, thank you.
Good. I'm glad. Those companies have kind of, I didn't really get into this, but they've created this army of tens of thousands of smaller websites out there that can just resell their inventory, and they have such a big margin they can afford to do that. And that has created a nightmare for the end consumer. I mean, booking travel and hotels is such an unpleasant experience these days, because it's just totally unclear where to get the best price and where to get the best service. So you're right to go directly to the hotel. I'm sure the hotels appreciate that.
Well, anyway, thank you so much. I so appreciate you allowing me to sit in, and I appreciated your comments and your presentation. It was excellent.
Thanks for joining us.
Well,
Are there any
Ashwin,
other
I'm
questions
sorry,
before we sign off?
we're getting close, but did someone have something else? Well, Ashwin, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Big
Thank you, Ashwin.
big silent applause for you, man. And it's
All
now
right.
it's now 12:15 in the morning on Friday
Not a problem.
in Rome, so you're ready for some sleep time.
That's right. Well, I look forward to connecting with everyone on LinkedIn. Please shoot me an invite.
Will do. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Ashwin. Take care.
Bye, Ron. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Regards to the family.
All right, you too.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Rob. Bye, Ashwin. Bye, Ron.
Smile, Chris, for God's sake. You look so miserable.
Thanks for joining, Ron.
You're welcome. Anytime.
We'll talk soon.
Right. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Hey, Chris.